Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Hegel's Metaphysics. We're going to take a look at pages 329 to 339. We're going to take a look at Hegel's Metaphysics and the turn toward ontology. The turn toward ontology. Let's go to block 1. We'll look at the logic of the ontology of the absolute. In itself, it is the source of existence. The concept has self-particularizing power. Then it does overcome the otherness in creation, and it does constitute the ideal. The concept is the source of its own absolute existence. Then we look at for another in note 2 as the power of self-particularization as the realization of the concept through incarnation. It does combine the two principles of Aufheben, which happen to be negation of the finite and unveiling and preservation of the infinite. The subjective logos differentiates itself as incarnated objectivity. The eternal logos incarnates itself in creation. This becomes the existence of the concept in the world. This incarnation becomes the existence of the concept of the absolute, or you could say the existence of the concept of the eternal logos in the world for us. Then we have block 1, note 3, for itself. The absolute is the returning necessity of the concept. By overcoming otherness, by overcoming finite otherness, through Aufheben, self-sublating mediation of negation and preservation, it's a reflection of essence. This is the concept as self-determined being, capital B. The concept as the return of self-determined being. And the concept is its own ground within its own self-movement. So the absolute is a triune ontological movement. The absolute spirit is a triune ontological self-movement. It is the source of all existence. It is the incarnate power that becomes the power of self-particularization by becoming incarnate, and then it returns back into itself as a returning necessity that will overcome otherness in that return. So the absolute spirit is a triune ontological self-movement of spirit. I mean, we're never going to deviate away from that. Hegel's Metaphysics, you might as well just put it in your head. Hegel's Metaphysics is triune, it's ontological trinity. Hegel's Metaphysics is a metaphysics of ontological trinity. He teaches the ontological trinity. Block 1, there's just another way of looking at that from the perspective of the absolute, but block 1 is the ontological trinity. Again, we get it many times in Hegel's work from different perspectives, but it never changes. Hegel writes an ontological trinity. He affirms and writes an ontological trinity. Now we move on to the essence of the absolute in block 2. And this is the realization of the concept. For Hegel, the triune concept of God realizes its goal, realizes its potential by becoming incarnate in the creation that it wants to uplift. So the realization of the concept is realization through incarnation, realization through the power of incarnate spirit, realization of the concept of the absolute spirit through the incarnation within all creation, within subjectivity and within objectivity. So block 2, note 1, realization of the concept is a realization taking place through Hegel's metaphysics. It is, critics say they have criticisms because metaphysics isn't considered a legitimate field of study anymore. So the critics of Hegel say, isn't Hegel's metaphysics pre-modern anachronism, kind of out of place in today's economy that doesn't really speak of metaphysics anymore? Today we speak of phenomenology, not metaphysics. Isn't it an indefensible monism? Isn't it mere apperceptive understanding? It's knowledge based on prior experience. Isn't that all that it is? And the answer is no. We affirm Hegel's logic as metaphysics. Hegel gives metaphysics a rebirth. Yes, philosophy has turned toward, today, logical positivism, linguistic analysis, definitely phenomenology. That's all you hear about is phenomenology now. You must begin with the phenomenal world. But Hegel, in the 19th century, he gave us a rebirth of metaphysics. And Moss affirms that. Moss disagrees with the critics. And he says, no, Hegel writes a legitimate metaphysics. And we discover it in his logic. So, block 2, note 2, realization of the concept as a logic of metaphysics. As a logic of metaphysics. As a logic of metaphysics. The concept is self-subsistent as the eternal incarnate logos, as the internal incarnate aletheia truth. Metaphysics is an inquiry into transcendence. That's all it is. Metaphysics is a logical inquiry into transcendence. In our world today, transcendence is denied. The secular world says there is no transcendence. Even secular philosophy says there is no transcendence. The closest we get to transcendence in philosophy today is intersubjectivity. Transcendence has been replaced by the phenomenology of intersubjectivity. Hegel says, no, there is real transcendence. There is a real, genuine, absolute spirit. There is a genuine realm of transcendence. Metaphysics is inquiry into transcendence. And for Hegel, it's inquiry into the categories of soul, worldview, and God. For Hegel, it means we inquire into the three concepts of soul, worldview, and God. Soul as subjectivity, God as objectivity, worldview as synthesis between the two. So for Hegel, metaphysics is a investigation, an inquiry into those concepts, into those very definite concepts of soul, worldview, and God. Psyche, cosmos, and theos. Psyche, cosmos, and theos. So then we get what Moss calls Hegel's metaphysics critical metaphysics. So block 2, note 3, the realization of the concept is Hegel's critical metaphysics. It's a reconfiguring of the major categories of soul, worldview, and God. Through what? Through the lens of ontology, through ontological inquiry. Because Hegel forms a metaphysic of a categorical ontology. Okay? Put a big circle around that. Block 2, note 3C. Hegel is forming a metaphysics of categorical ontology. He identifies the major categories of transcendence. He arranges them into a holistic ontology. That becomes his metaphysic. It's the metaphysics of a categorical ontology. He develops the concepts necessary for understanding cosmos worldview. Absolute knowledge counts as his metaphysics. It is Hegel's critical metaphysics. It is Hegel's metaphysical definition of God. Remember our previous lesson on the doctrine of God. This is Hegel's metaphysical definition of God. All philosophy is ontotheology, especially the first and third moments of every triad. The first moment of simple self-reference, the third moment of return from differentiation. Therefore, logic of the absolute constitutes God's thoughts. We participate in the mind of God by participating in the transcendence of absolute spirit, by participating in and forming a metaphysics of categorical ontology. Our task is to participate in and to form, along with Hegel, a metaphysics of categorical ontology. What's ontology? Structure of existence. So we are supposed to form a structure of existence using major categories that we discover in the Greek, and the concepts under those categories. We are to identify the major categories of a genuine divine ontology and each of the concepts that every category abbreviates. Systems and subsystems, all arranged in a structure of existence. That is the task of Hegel. That is the task we are asked to participate in. A metaphysics of categorical ontology. Hegel writes a metaphysics of major categorical ontology. And it's what? It's a process of ontological inquiry. We want to understand the worldview. It is a metaphysical definition of God, and it emphasizes God as self-referential and God as always returning from differentiation. God always returning from incarnation as differentiation. God always returns out of that incarnation and lifts creation back into reunification with God's self. Ontological Trinity. Hegel teaches and repeats over and over and over again throughout the phenomenology. An ontological trinity from varying perspectives. But you get the same ontological trinity all the way through the phenomenology, all the way through. Let's go on to block 3. The spirit of the ontology of the absolute. It is a return of overcoming otherness. Hegel posits a subjective logic as metaphysics, as a doctrine of the concept. He follows Kant and he follows Aristotle. He takes up Kant on his idea of generating the eidos ideas, or Hegel calls them the eidos concepts, and he takes up Aristotle's movement of the ideas from dunamis potential to energia actual. So that's the two very important contributions that Hegel takes up into his metaphysics. Therefore, block 3, note 2, we have Hegel's triad of metaphysics as 1. Kant's eidos ideas, Kant's eidos concepts. 2. Aristotle's energia actualization of those ideas or concepts, which 3 creates the synthesis of Hegel as the nous mind that forms a ontological cosmos worldview, enlisting the eidos concepts and emphasizing that they are self-moving, self-actualizing. They of themselves move from dunamis potential to energia actual. The triad is Kant, Aristotle equals Hegel. Kant plus Aristotle equals Hegel. Thesis: the concepts generated by Immanuel Kant. Antithesis: the movement of the concepts from dunamis potentiality of spirit to energia actualization of spirit. And those two come together in Hegel's metaphysical categorical ontology. Kant and Aristotle come together in Hegel's metaphysical, transcendent, categorical ontology, which is always ontological theology, which is always ontological trinity, always ontological theology. Very critical area. And we took the ontological turn in this lesson. And in block 1, again, we had the ontological trinity. In block 2, we looked at the self-empowered realization of the absolute, the concept of absolute spirit. God realizes his own intended purpose through his incarnation of the Spirit and then lifting creation back into God's self. So we had realization of the absolute spirit in block 2, and then the ontological triad in block 3 of Immanuel Kant, who gave Hegel the eidos ideas, the concepts, Aristotle, who gave Hegel the self-movement power of the concepts as they of themselves move from dunamis potential to energia actual. Hegel put it together as a metaphysics of categorical ontology. We've had a look here at Hegel's metaphysics of categorical ontology as a metaphysical definition of God. How is God defined? As ontological trinity, and only can be understood as ontological trinity. It is a mystery, but our best explanation, our best understanding, is to understand the triune Godhead as ontological trinity. Ontological trinity. That's going to wrap up 329 to 339. And next lesson we finish up. We go all the way to the end. We go to 355. So next lesson we finish up Metaphysics by Moss.